Hello, I am Tarina Ali, and I am the founder of Tarina Ali Therapeutic Services based here in the United States of America. And I am so elated to be a part of Talkam's broadcast here in the month um, discussing human sex trafficking. And I am elated to be a speaker on this subject matter, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to share with you all today. I have a few points that I wanted to share with you all to help bring awareness to what I believe is a pandemic in reference to human sex trafficking. Many of us are in a pandemic facing COVID-19. However, human sex trafficking has been in the earth um, way longer than COVID-19, and it will be here, unfortunately, even after COVID-19 passes. And it's just such a horrific thing that happens, unfortunately, to many, many, many women and girls, in particular, women and girls in the Black and Brown communities. And we must be aware of the signs uh, to make you aware of if this potentially is human sex trafficking. I have been a counselor for over 20 years, and I have come across many young girls, or even women for that matter, who were involved in sex trafficking for a number of reasons why. No one wakes up in the morning to say, hey, I want to be exploited or I want to be uh, in human sex trafficking. There are many things that transpire that potentially lead victims to being in human sex trafficking. Often that I find out that those who have been involved in human sex trafficking are predominantly women and girls. And I'm definitely an advocate for the mistreatment of women and girls. It's a human rights issue. And in every country around the world, women and girls are what I believe are violated the most, and especially in such horrific ways that they are in so many vulnerable communities. And statistics show that those who are ployed, and I use the word ployed or lured into human sex trafficking, come from very vulnerable communities. And so there are oftentimes so many social and emotional things that are already going on before the person, the young girl or the woman gets involved into human sex trafficking. What I have seen here in the US and other places is that sometimes that the girls in particular come from displaced families, meaning families that do not have a very solid home structure. Um, Here in the US, there's a thing called foster care, where if the parents aren't able to care for a family for whatever reason, that they're placed in other homes that with their not family of origin, and that in itself can be traumatic. And we find that many, many, many women and girls who have been involved in some form of sexual have run away from homes from to in the US we call them pimps or people who are pretty much just prey upon the vulnerable communities. And so Black and brown people just throughout the world have such higher rates of being involved in human sex trafficking, and the racial disparities there are something that we must have a conversation about. We find that women and girls who have been forced into this lifestyle sometimes have to deal with their own level of psychological trauma that we must not dismiss, that often happens and is there for those who are employed, yes, yet again, I say that, into human sex trafficking, that many of them have adverse childhood experiences that make them be at higher risk for being sucked into such a market of sex slave. And you know, when you have a family that does not have high finances, or children cannot be fed, or there are just so many other social ills that are going on, you have these people who prey upon the women and girls and offering them a better opportunity that their family of origin could not. And it doesn't necessarily always start out as the person as being abused. A lot of times those who ploy the women and girls into sex trafficking promise them a life that they may not have had before. They're promising them opportunities to work. Unfortunately, sometimes there are family members who need their young child or daughter to work, and so they go to these homes and they're not expecting the child to be abused in any way. They're thinking they're just going to work to make some money from the family, and that they're just being coerced to do things of a sexual nature because they know their family needs money. And already some of these girls come from such vulnerable communities where they're already suffering from some level of psychological damage or trauma from their upbringing. I've seen where there have been girls who have run away from such traumatic, hostile family units, and they've turned to drugs and or alcohol as a way to cope. And then in return, the substance abuse dependency and or addiction comes into play. And so then there you have it, where you need a way to support your addiction, and so you go into the sex slave trade. And so there are so many avenues that women and girls get into human sex trafficking that we need to talk about. We think about even in the U.S. In certain areas, like when there are major sports events, where we call here in the U.S. like football. In other countries they may call it soccer, but it's football here in the U.S. Like major events. That women are lured into these places to have sex with such high profile people, and it's not new that from the beginning of time that women have been used, what I believe, in a very detrimental way. I believe women bodies are beautiful and wonderful, and we should make choices of what we want to do with our body. But sometimes women are and girls are forced into circumstances that are just so hard to bear, and that sex is being used to pretty much put them in a form of slavery, promising them things, and then that a lot of them are taking away from their families, so they have that no family connection. They're actually stolen. And so when you have no family connection and all that are these people who are leading the sex trafficking, you have nowhere else to go. And so you don't want to be killed, you don't want to be murdered. And then also there has been instances that we must be aware of where women and girls have been promised an opportunity to get an education, where you may have an influential family who says, well, you can come and work for me as an indentured servant, or you can work in my house as a maid, and then I'll give you money to go to school. And they offer you to come to another country. And the goal is to also to take you away from your familiarity, from your country of origin, because you have to totally depend on them. And then there's fear that comes in that they're so afraid to leave, and where are they going to go? And but we're grateful for many places around the world, and one particular that comes to my mind that works with those in human sex trafficking is an organization called A21. And even with me, I have an organization called Sexual Trauma and Restorative Services Global Mission and Training, where I have this program that I run is actually a training to bring awareness to this topic of sex trafficking, and also how to help the women and girls become restored from being involved in human sex trafficking. But there are some signs and symptoms that I want to briefly discuss that we could look out for, or that you can look out for even that matter. And I actually saw this on, it was a good resource at the 821 that I'm using to quote them, because it was just a really good resource that they had listed. You definitely control another person when they're involved in human sex trafficking. I had mentioned that before. You control their thoughts. You control what food they eat. You control their finances. And so you say, well, why don't they just want to run away? But where are they going to run to? It's kind of hard to run to. You don't have anything. All of your everything is wrapped up into these evil people, which I call them. They try to say and psychologically twist their mind that they're offering them a great service, or they're giving them a better way out. But it's never a better way out when you're being forced or removed from a connection that is healthy. And although some may have come from families that may have been displaced due to war or conflict, or it may have been displaced due to family disputes or drug addiction in parents that they're not able to care for the children, the alternative is not to go into human sex trafficking. Sometimes those who have been the leaders of these have told the girls that they will love them, that they will care for them. And so, who doesn't want to be loved? Who doesn't want to be cared for? But those are lies, what I say, from the pits of hell. And I use that word because that's where I believe that it just comes from, to brainwash someone to get them to believe. So we must talk about the self-esteem and the psychological implications that come from sexual assault and human sex trafficking, because that is a form of sexual assault. Uh, Also, the assign is where the person, I've mentioned again, that they do not have any earnings. They have so low wages, and so people prey on vulnerable communities who may live in just impoverished situations, and everyone wants a way out. And when America, we say here a come up, everyone wants a come up. But going through human sex trafficking is not the way to go. Sometimes there are women and girls who do not have official identification, so they have literally been robbed from their family or wherever they belong, and the identity is changed, and so they don't know who they are as a person. Sometimes they don't have the legal documents to confirm who they are, and so this thing is really, really, really deep. And I'm glad I've been given the opportunity just to talk about some of these things. They offer them a false job, and I've said that in the beginning. Once again, their language, where they are, they may move them to a country where they do not know the language, and so they're stuck on dealing with who that they're with, who's the head of the human sex trafficking, because then they don't know the language, and then the laws sometimes do not protect, just unfortunately, women and girls who do not have the financial resources. That's a real life issue here, that if you do not have the financial resources to pay for attorneys, then sometimes you may not get the legal representation that you need. And so we're grateful for so many organizations around the world who help victims of human sex trafficking. And then ultimately, the persons in human sex trafficking arenas feel that they're just trapped. They feel that there's no way out. They've been told that nobody will want them. I've heard stories of girls being told that they are ugly, that their bodies are ugly. So much body shaming, just so much negativity. But I wholeheartedly believe that you can come out of dark situations. And so this is just to raise the awareness that human sex trafficking happens around the world. It literally happens in every country around the world, and we must not turn a blind eye to it. We must continue to sound the alarm and to educate our women and girls about this. And boys are exploited too, but we must educate them. We must build up the self-esteem of our women and girls. We must deal with the codependencies that persons may have. We must deal with the trauma. We must deal with the trauma that has surfaced even before they were into sex trafficking. And so, if we do those things continuously, and if we're honest and have a conversation and being empathetic to those who may have gotten caught into these arenas, that I definitely believe that they can be restored. I think that education is always the key, to have conversations as such, so that we can become even more aware. People tend to think that some stuff just happens in just small villages or certain really abject poor countries, but that's just not true. You have people who come from affluential communities, sometimes not as much, because of trauma, who runs away, but oftentimes it is from vulnerable communities that I've seen in my experience, that the young women and girls have been lured into this lifestyle or even taken. And so, if you want more information or me to share more about this, I'm absolutely willing to. I am Serena Ali. You can find me all over social media. My last name is spelled Olley. I'm all over social media, and I'm just here to motivate and to let you know that although this topic is extremely horrific, that you can become restored no matter what. Unfortunately, some